All right, we are got to have our next guest. I talked about this earlier. And Satya Thalman, welcome. How are you?
Hey, pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at Americans for Responsible Innovation and a Senior Fellow with the Foundation for American Innovation. Talk to us about AI-generated fake election info. 55% of voters have been exposed to it.
Well, yeah, we conducted this poll, and we found a majority of voters feel that they have been exposed to AI-generated content, deepfakes, misinformation, and a pretty similar number, 57%, are deeply doubt their ability to distinguish between fake imagery or messaging or content and real content.
You know, and that's I was going to head to that because I think some do. Now, I'm not trying to, sound like I'm any smarter than anybody else. I think just because, Satya, I do what I do here daily and I have to read and look through all sorts of things and so on, I can typically look at something and say, yeah, that's not the way it is, or that's AI generated, or that's not real, or there's no way that could be real. Sometimes it's no way that could be real. Let's do a little bit of follow-up and research on that to determine. So question for you, how do people know if it's real or not?
Well, the easiest way, and unfortunately there's just no way to kind of realistically go through the world like this, but try to stick to official sources. That could be, if it's election stuff, from the actual campaign themselves, from government agencies, from secretaries of state. But of course, nobody can just rely on official sources. That's just not how we act in the world. But I think part of it is also just the more awareness we have will build a kind of skepticism into our mind. You're probably in the 99th percentile of media consumers because you are a member of the media. So you probably you've trained yourself to be a little bit more skeptical. I think we all kind of need to be. And if something is just too weird to be true, don't just fall for it. It probably isn't true.
I said this to a caller, or a guest we had earlier. My dad raised me, and this was a long time ago. So before the internet or anything like that had ever even been invented, Satya, my dad always used to say, believe about none of what you read and half of what you see, and you'll probably be okay in life. And that same philosophy isn't much different today. I mean, I know that's to the extreme, and you kind of laugh about that, but there's times where that's not far off.
It's not far off. I think it's I think it's words of wisdom that are very much true. The thing I worry about isn't so much this moment. I mean, this is probably the first, I'll call it AI election, not an election about AI, but where AI is a meaningful part of the conversation and how we understand this election is going to play out. But it's just going to get worse if that's your point of view, because the ability of AI to generate images that are totally compelling is just getting better and easier and cheaper. And I'm not worried about, John, I'm not really worried about this sort of funny meme makers, Trump and Harris holding hands, or embracing each other, which is obviously fake. I'm worried about foreign threat actors who are not just trying to have a laugh, but are really trying to purposefully manipulate our election.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you on that, Satya, and there's going to be more of that coming down the pike, I'm afraid, and people are going to be really diligent in this, and we can get into in a moment, maybe some of the laws that, potentially could be around this, although I don't know how you even enforce those things because AI is getting so good that it's hard for some to even recognize, what it is. But for those of you listening, here's a really quick tip, by the way, especially when it comes to video and or pictures. And Satya, correct me if I'm wrong. If they look super, 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 super good, almost not even lifelike, it's AI.
Yeah, that's generally how they're. But like I said, even the ones the quality is getting better and better.
Always.
And using very, very simple tools. You don't need to be an expert computer coder or a hacker. There are apps on your phone that you can use. And actually, I know we're on the eve of election. I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C., looking at the Capitol building. The part about it that I really worry about, and we're urging Congress to act, is deepfake revenge porn. Creating a non-consensual imagery.
That's right.
Using very, very little input. You don't need thousands and thousands of pictures of someone to create fake images. You can, in as little as one or two.
That's right.
And these are things that high school students are getting access to, both to produce it, but also as victims. And we just do not have any kind of standardized laws around, how do we get someone in trouble for doing this? How do we enforce norms that say this is not okay?
Here's my fear, and I think you might understand what I'm going to say next. And I'm going to say this in the nicest way possible, but I'm going to mean what I say. We have a bunch of people in that building you're looking at that frankly are about as tech savvy as a kindergartner. I don't think I'm exaggerating at times when I say that are going to now create the laws to do the things you just said. That's a bigger fear for me than AI.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to soft pedal it. I think you're right. Congress does not have a history of being particularly tech savvy or ahead of the curve.
Nope.
I think there are.
Really quick, Saj, just no offense. Some of those guys have been in that office longer than the internet's been around.
That's right. And so we have a lot of work to do. You should be skeptical or have a fear of Congress either not acting or acting poorly. I think there are a few folks in Congress that actually are pretty tech savvy. They themselves were software developers in their previous life, or worked in tech industry, started successful businesses. They're not the majority of members of Congress. I'm not saying that, but there are a few folks that I think are trying to be serious, trying to be thoughtful, not trying to overstate things, but say, hey, let's take a serious look. And that's what I work on day to day is trying to find those folks and find things. By the way, a lot of these things are bipartisan. The kinds of transparency laws around AI in the states, these are not in red states, blue states. They're unfortunately they're not across the country, and that's what we need.
Well, I appreciate you helping in that particular arena. I mean, I watched some of the hearings involving, things like, big tech and TikTok and so on. And even some of the conversations I'm hearing, Sachi, at times, I'm like, wait a minute. You guys don't have the foggiest idea how this stuff works, do you?
It was embarrassing for a good chunk of Congress when.
I'm sorry, Sachi. Literally, I'm sitting there listening to this stuff like you guys don't have a clue how this stuff works. I don't know how you turn your cell phone on.
Here's a little secret I'll tell you about Congress, though. Hearings almost always are not substantive. They're mostly for scoring points.
You're right.
There is serious staffers and members of Congress that when the cameras are off and they're in the conference room and negotiating, they actually are taking time to learn, to build up a knowledge base, ask real questions, not gotcha questions, but real questions. How does this work? How do we understand this? Let's bring in experts. And they do that behind the scenes. So there should be more of it. I mean, I'm not saying Congress is perfect, but there actually is under the hood a lot of machinery going on of people trying to do serious work. And that's where we're trying to engage.
Well, I appreciate you guys doing that because, again, as you can tell, I may not be an expert in this area, but, being self-employed most of my life, you have to learn some of these things on your own because you can't always call the IT guy to come along and do it for you. So you kind of by default, Satya, have to learn a lot of these different things, which I have, and fairly savvy on the way a lot of these things work. And I think given what I do here daily, even when it comes to AI and so on, and being able to even in some videos, like, okay, wait a minute, that's not a real video. There's no way that guy's throwing the ball that way, or there's no way the guy's driving the car that way, or there's no way, XYZ, Sach, you just kind of go down the list. And some of that really comes down to common sense. It's like, okay, if that's too good to be true, it probably is.
We need an increase in our kind of media literacy, and that's not just AI, but that includes the effect of AI and the kind of content that we're seeing. We also need just some basic expectations around transparency. I can't stop someone from creating an image and putting it out there. The platforms can label these things, media networks, radio, broadcast, TV, terrestrial. They can require political ads that use AI-generated content to say so. They have to put it on the screen. Some people kind of tune that stuff out, but we have to start somewhere. We have to start being explicit and not pretending that this is all just the same. It's all the same content. And because we're getting used to accepting the idea that we're being lied to, and oftentimes we are. I'm not just saying in AI.
No, I agree.
I think people are rightly upset, and they say, well, you know what, I don't believe anything because I believe that I'm being lied to. And they're not unjustified in feeling that way. But we shouldn't just throw up our hands and say, well, them's the breaks, and then go on. I mean, we have an opportunity to at least take some sensible steps around AI, and hopefully early enough in the AI cycle that because look what we did with social media. We just sort of waited until the end to say, hey, what are the rules around kids? What do we owe children?
We didn't do anything on the front side at all.
And by the time
Yep.
we were sort of even thinking about that, social media was just integrated.
It was out of control. You
no
couldn't
way
go
to
back.
undo it.
That genie was out of the bottle, I guess you could say, Satya. You couldn't go back and put it back in.
Yeah, it was metabolized into the culture, basically.
That's right.
Right? You can't
That's right.
sort of but AI, we're still at the kind of beginning
That's right.
steps before it becomes totally invisible to us. So now is the time to say, let's take and I'm all for. I think AI is going to be incredibly wonderful, and there's going to be some incredible benefits from AI. So I'm not. This isn't about sort of doomer and
no, I'm not anti-AI either. I look at AI like I do. I'm a car guy, Satya, so I look at it like anything else, like a car. When it came along, horse and buggy guys hated it. They thought it was the death to everything, and they weren't going to buy in, and it was totally, against everything they'd ever learned. And look where we are today. I mean, everything can be used as a tool for good or for bad. AI will be no different.
It's a tool, and tools are neither good or evil. They're tools, but we need to recognize what the potential risks of those tools are and put some basic guardrails, and then everyone can innovate around them and adopt them and come up with clever new uses. But it's so much easier to do that up front than waiting, say, 10 years from now when it's just completely circulated. Yeah.
It'll be too late by then. So, no, I appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you. As you can tell, this is a subject that I really enjoy. I think it's something that we need to get a handle on. It's only going to grow and get exponentially larger. And by the way, the other, get your opinion on this, the difference between this and even social media, I feel this is going to grow much faster than what social media even did.
I think there's a reasonable likelihood that that's the case, which is another thing that makes it urgent that we act now.
Yeah.
We kind of get our hands around this now, because another year.
Yep.
I don't know how sort of how fully integrated and it's like that thing, like a fish doesn't know it's wet, because like at some point it's just going to be sort of so around us that it becomes invisible to us.
Right.
But I don't think that's the world that we want to be in.
I agree. All right. How do folks find you and keep up on some of this?
ARI.us. That's our website. Americans for Responsible Innovation. They can follow us there. Give our newsletter. Subscribe.
It's been a joy. I've enjoyed it. Anytime something changes or you want to give us an update, you let me know. I'll have you back on. I enjoy talking this. This is really good.
Real pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you, Satya, very much. I appreciate that. And again, for those of you listening, ARI.us.